Hey there guys, in this video I'm going to be talking about the Brave Exvius damage spreadsheet that I created and maintain as like a community resource that people can use. I'm going to be going over pretty much the entire sheet, talking about the way it works, how I arrived at the calculations and all that I've gotten to. I'm also going to be showing you some tips in the video for ways to use it for yourself, to either use it as like a damage calculation tool to help out in things like dark visions, or to just evaluate units, in the way that you personally want to, using my sheet as like a baseline. So we're going to just go over it, piece by piece in the video. So first of all, for my sheet, as far as where do you find the sheet, I'll go ahead and pin a link to the sheet in the comments, but also in the future, you can always find a link to my spreadsheet from my YouTube channel. If you go to the information tab on my personal channel, I've got a link permanently available right there. You can also find the link to my spreadsheet on like Reddit. There's links on multiple of the Brave Exvius Discords, etc. But the easiest way is to just go to the information tab on my YouTube channel and you'll find the link right there. But anyway, so on the sheet, we've got a few different tabs. And we're just going to go over them one by one. So first of all, the information tab. This is just basically like a patch note tab where you can find the latest updates and changes that I've made. I'll usually only list like the major updates. Like for example, yesterday I did a pretty big update to the Dark Visions tab. I updated all the units for a new race combo. I added a few future units to the DV tab for calculations. And then I updated all the older units for the most recent gear. But as far as the little notes of the sheet real quick, the one thing right here, this is kind of a big one, the sheet is primarily, at the first and foremost, my personal sheet that I use for my own use. So that's, some people kind of disagree with the like assumptions I make for builds and all that. They're saying like, oh, you should include this or this in calculations. You can definitely make a copy of the sheet and change it however you feel like is a better way to calculate. But, the sheet, at the end of the day, the default to the sheet is going to be based on the way I feel that calculations should be made. And again, I'm going to go over how to make your own sheet in this video. And again, the gear and the buff, etc. There's a few things that I don't include, and I'll talk about them in a minute. And here's the important one. I wrote the sheet to be easy to edit so that anything you don't agree with, you can very easily edit it on your own and then change it to what you do want it to show. So here's some of the basic calculations for the damage sheet that I use. So for all the units in calculated, they're all assumed to be EX3 and level 120. So some units scale a little bit better than others when you go to level 130. That can adjust it, but just for the sake of my own convenience, I only calc them at level 120 EX3. On the morale tab, the calculations are assuming at the maximum morale gauge. So any burst calculations are assuming that your burst turn, you have filled the morale gauge to the maximum. At lower morale, the calculations would vary. Hybrids are not included. Now, basically, that only matters for the new Carlet. And the reason they're not included is because Carlet is definitely worth it, and I'd love to have a good way to show Carlet's damage. The issue is hybrid damage dealers use a very unique damage calculation, and when I wrote the sheet, at the time, hybrids didn't matter, and for me to go back and add a way to calculate hybrids on the damage spreadsheet, I would basically have to just rewrite the whole sheet from scratch, because the formula that I used on the sheet does not handle hybrids whatsoever. So I'm not going to rewrite the entire sheet just for Carlet. She's the only hybrid that matters. We've got none coming in the future, at least from JP, that matter. So it's unfortunate that Carlet is left out because she is a very relevant damage dealer. But I'm not going to rewrite the entire sheet just for one unit. So apologies for that. So as far as the damage buff calculations, we're assuming a 300% LB buff on all units that use their LB, and we're assuming a 250% killer buff. Now, in some cases, this might not be realistic. In some cases, it might not even be possible. Like I don't think there's a 250 Aqua Killer, for example. But just for the sake of making things universally compatible, we're assuming a 250 killer buff in all the calculations. And as far as the weapon in peril goes, this one's a little bit flexible based on just my personal choice. So if a unit has their own weapon in peril, it's included, guaranteed. Sometimes I'll include a higher weapon in peril if it's commonly available. For example, there's lots of units that do sword in peril. So anyone using a sword, I'll give them a minimum of a 30% sword in peril because there's so many units that do it. Now, there's definitely better out there, like if you're using, Rick, Rain, Dwayne, the list goes on and on. There's way better than 30% sword in perils, but if the unit doesn't have it themselves, I don't include it by default. But I will give everyone a minimum of 25% weapon in peril. And the ones I choose 25 for are the ones that are just not common at all. For example, Milo. Milo's calculations are using rods, and as we know, just in reality, you're not really putting anyone that does a rod in peril on your Dark Visions team. Like, who does rod in peril in the game? The 5-star Realm, the Premium Aerith, Lady Shantoto, and Tsukiko, and Emperor. So really, there's basically none of them going to be on a realistic party with Milo. So but just for the calculation's sake, I'll give him a 25% baseline in peril, but I'm not going to assume a 35% in peril for Milo, even though a lot of units do have that. You're probably not going to find them on a team in reality. So yeah, the weapon in peril thing, that's probably the most heavily thing based around just my, pick a number out of a hat, and I just go with what I think is realistic for the most part. For Dark Visions only, we're assuming the max possible burst within 5 turns. So Dark Visions calculations are cut off at turn 5. Now, I do realize on some parties, you can go longer than turn 5 and it won't matter. But, for example, we're not going to assume Angela has spent 18 turns getting her maximum stack. We're not assuming turn 6 for Wilk's maximum burst because a lot of units will lose damage after turn 5. Like basically any of the JP damage dealers, physical damage dealers, their damage drops off after turn 5. So we're assuming Dark Vision is turn 5 or earlier. So for Wilk, for example, we're only doing, I think, 2 stacks on his LB, or is it 1 stack plus the buffs? I don't know. The point is, for the rotations, we cut it off at turn 5. For Angela, she only gets like 2 stacks from an LB or whatever it is. Angela's not even calculated because she's so old, but you get the idea. Turn 5 or earlier for Dark Visions. Units with racial modifiers are not assumed to be against that race. For example, Balthier, his shifted LB, I think it does bonus damage to machines, humans, or beast. I forget the exact combo. But the point is, for calculations, we're assuming a non-matching race. So just keep that in mind. So anyone with a racial modifier on their LB, they're going to deal extra damage if the races line up. But that's not assumed at a baseline. As far as the race target for the tabs, the Clash of Wills tabs, I always keep up to date. The Clash of Wills tab will always be targeted against either the current or the next, based on the monthly bulletin, Clash of Wills target and race combination. As far as the Dark Visions tab, I try to keep it updated, but that one sometimes gets behind, and I'll keep using the same race combo after the race has come and gone. But like I said, I just yesterday went and updated all the Dark Visions units to human and bird, so they're now set up for the next upcoming Dark Visions. Tyvis's STMR and other mod boost that are usable on the unit themselves are assumed when it's possible. So, for example, This is less of a big deal these days because most units are using a 150 amplify, meaning they cannot use Tibus's STMR anymore because it's either that or their 150 amp, and obviously the amp is way better. So for the most part, this is only for older units, but whenever the unit can use Tibus's STMR as a benefit, we are assuming it. Same thing for Dark Rain's focus ability. Temporary mod boost such as Titus's Garb, Cool Smile, etc. These turn 5 and then gone, can't refresh boost. Those are only assumed for Dark Visions. And the reason for that is, as you know, most Clash of Wills fights are now going to turn 8, turn 10, turn 15, turn 20. Like, more than turn 5 matters in Clash of Wills. So for Clash of Wills, we do not assume the temporary boost because, you know, you might be doing your big burst on turn 7 or something, and you need to be able to be at max potential. So, for example, either Cloud or Wondrous Flash Lightning or Chizuru with the Cool Smile, we're not assuming those on the Clash of Wills tab. We are assuming them in Dark Visions, though. Evokers, we're only using the Yuna STMR buff for Evokers. So there are lots of ways to power up Evokers. For example, the base form LB of Yuna, the base form LB of Garnet. You can use things like Braska's cooldown. There's lots of ways to power up Evoker damage. But we're not assuming you're bringing the whole like Voltron combo to power up Yuna. So we're only assuming a Yuna STMR buff because that can go on a support unit. That's relatively easy to fit in. But we're not assuming you're bringing Garnet, Yuna, and Dagger just to power up Tsukiko's LB. You get what I'm saying? So for Evokers, we're only assuming the Yuna buff. Older units might not have an updated build. You know, I don't update the builds every single week. So if a new Vision card comes out and it's amazing for, like, let's just say, Diverti, and Diverti's damage will go way up. He might not be using that card because I'm not going to go and update every single unit every single week for every single new piece of gear. So older units might be using an older build. There might be a new piece of gear available that would change their calculations. For the most part, there's rarely going to be like a single piece of gear that heavily sways a unit. Sometimes it might happen, and the unit might be out of date. And if that happens to an extreme degree, if a unit is too low in damage, if a unit is really out of date and you feel like they really deserve an update, just let me know. Ping me on Discord and say, hey, my favorite unit just got this new piece of gear. Can you please recalculate them? I'll probably do it. Not a problem. Just let me know. No big deal. And then units with really low damage are just taken out. They're just too old. So let's pop over to the outdated tab. So here we go. So here's units that their damage is just so low these days. We just don't calculate them anymore because it's not worth it, and it just work. So I'll just stick them in this tab. I'll erase their build and just stick them here for archive sake, basically. So as you can see, Aerith's damage, Reagan the Return's damage, Dorgan's damage, Laguna's damage, Jek's damage. All these damages are just too low to be relevant these days. So they go to the retirement home, and then if they get crowns in the future, we put them back on the main tab. So that's the basics of the tab. And real quick, we're going to now pop over to the utility tab before we get into calculations. The utility tab is where I just show you some quick at-a-glance references. So I list all of the ally side fields. These are either amplify or stat fields. I have them sorted by element. The ones in orange are the upcoming from the JP server, but they're not available on global yet. So for example, Earth Amplify fields, we've got Setzer, Lunafreya, and Redia coming later, but currently we've got Roka, Ferris, Tulian, and Diverti giving us Earth fields, stuff like that. And then as far as stat fields or LB fields, again, down here, for LB fields, we've got Cecil, Esther, and Deuce. And then, in the future, we're also getting Redia, Tibus, and Roka for LB fields, stat fields, etc., etc. Also, the fields for enemy sides. These are basically imperil fields. And again, same concept. I show you the ones that are available in yellow. The ones that are coming in the future are in orange. So like dark imperil fields, we've got Saul, Renoa, Vlad, and Elaspiris. In the future, we've got Cursed, Nelica. And there you go. And then the rest of this on the tab are just like, references. Here's some auto-cast mitigations. And these are like, if you're fighting a boss, you're like, I'm fighting a machine boss. It's hitting really hard. How can I get machine mitigation if no one on the party does it? You can go to my sheet and be like, oh, I can get machine mitigation from either 10% from Renora's uniform, or I can get 30% from the vision card. Stuff like that. So, just a reference for mitigations, a reference for auto buff killers, a reference for auto amplifies, a reference for just generic defensive utility items. For example, Seraph Staff gives status immunity, Ancient Aroma fills the Esper gauge, Antiquated Uniform gives Mirage at the start of battle, AoE re-raise with the vision card, just all kind of neat utility that might be useful on a clear. And then offensive utility, same thing. Some of these fill morale gauge, like the Peppermint Rod or the Celestite Gear. Weapon imperils, leave things to me. Self-inflicted Berserk for, Avenger. And, oh, actually, this is gone. I got to erase that. I'll do that later. Etc. And then, again, just more utility stuff. Active cast buffs. These are some buffs that are actively cast, not passive. So, like, amplifies. You can seal magic with Nethicite, Sword of Kings. You can get magic focus with 3 different sources. Stuff like that. Active utility. And then and again, this list isn't completely up to date. I add to it when I can. And then some items that give you chaining stuff, like Bolting Strike, Extreme Nova, Flood, Stardust Ray. Just ways to get chain frames that you don't have naturally. Now, as far as the damage calculations go, so here is my damage spreadsheet. So on this sheet, up here it'll tell you the currently targeted race. This is currently updated for Human Bird because that's what we're getting next. And then some generic calculations. So the units in yellow are the currently available units on Global. The units in light blue or aqua are the units that have been recently released. Like, they're still on banner. So Addison Rae just got released. She's in blue. And the ones in orange are units from the JP server that we're expecting to come soon, but they are not here yet. I'm just adding them for your reference. So here's some basic calculations. So the max burst is assuming your 1-turn burst on the Dark Visions tab. That's your 1-turn burst in the first 5 turns. And the rest of this is just filling in unit information. So their modifier, their LB damage buff if it's an LB, their total killer, their evo damage, their amplify, their weapon imperil, their weapon variance, their chain mod. Stat buff is handled by the universal thing. But for example, if there was a 500% stat buff for a single person, you could put it there and you'll see that it'll update the thing. But by default, it's handled by up here 400%, which you can also change this whatever you want. You can change it to 300. There we go. So 300. Give it a second to update the calculation. There you go. So now all the units are calculated at 300 stat buff. You can change that to whatever you want, but we go with 400 for our default. And as far as amplify, we always assume a minimum of 45 amplify up here in the party amplify window. Focus or Frenzy, this is the stat buffs that go over the cap. For example, Magic Focus or things like Cartons, Berserk, etc. The leader skills. So leader skills are always assumed to be the highest available for that unit. Sometimes the leader skill might not make a ton of sense. For example, Genesis is using a 600 leader skill, which is only available from Zac. And as you know, Zac is leading a either Thunder or Final Fantasy VII party. And Genesis is Final Fantasy VII. So you might probably not be putting Genesis on like a Thunder party with Zac, but you could, and I'm going to show you the max potential. So even though the Zac's leader skill doesn't make a ton of sense for Genesis, it does apply. You can do it. So that's why I apply the highest leader skill available to a unit. And then their base stats, their card stats, their unbuffed gear stat. Over here, I have the build save that I used. You can look at the build and see if it's there. And if you scroll to the side more, units that have a special category, Crystal or Rebel, I put a little X over here. For example, this is a Rebel unit, which is Wondrous Lightning, of course. So there you go. And you can see the damage breakdown right here. Now, if you feel like, for example, you want to change something, for example, let's say you want to change Genesis's leader skill to only 500 for Flaring Rain. You can do that, but you can't do that on my sheet directly. So the way you would do this, let me go ahead and I got this little zoomed in a little bit. Let's go ahead and do it this way. So the way you would do this, you would go to up here at the top of the sheet, you would go to File and Make a Copy. That's going to put a copy of the sheet into your own personal Google Drive. And from there, you would edit that sheet. And then you could edit the sheet to whatever way you want. Then you'll have your own personal copy of the sheet. And then you have access to edit it and change whatever you want. Like let's say maybe you want to change the amplify to assume Lena's field. You would change that to 190, etc., etc., etc. And then if, for example, in the future you wanted to get an updated version of my sheet, let's say, 2 weeks from now, I did a big update and you want that, just go back and make a copy yet again, delete your old copy, make a new copy, and it'll copy it exactly as is from my sheet, and then from there you can edit your local copy. Now, as far as, also, by the way, and on your own personal sheet, you can change whatever you want. You can, for example, you can sort these by, you go up here to Data and Sort Range, Advanced Sorting, and you can, for example, sort them by element. Let's say you're trying to build an elemental party. So there we go, and you can sort the sheet. So now the sheet is sorted by element. You can also sort it by, let's do it this way. Let's go ahead and do all this. Let's go to Data, let's go to Sort Range, let's sort by element, and let's then sort by B descending. Let's go ahead and sort the elements by their damage. So now you have each elemental damage dealer sorted by their burst. So here's like the highest burst damage dealers in the dark element. Here's the highest burst damage dealers in the fire element, etc. You can also, let's go ahead and look. Let's go to T. So you can also sort by these little columns that I made. So we'll go up here, we'll data, we'll sort. T is the rebel category. So here we can go here, and we can sort by the highest damage dealers of rebels. As you can see over here, these are all the rebels. So from here upwards. So from here to here, here's all the rebel damage dealers. And again, you can like use this to help yourself build a party. Like if you want to build a rebel party, you'll see that Lightning, Yuffie, Tifa, Cloud Strife are some of the highest damage dealers in the rebel category. Now, they might not always be synergistic. For example, you've got a Thunder, Earth, Water damage dealer, which might not be worth it. But you can also sort by category, sort by element. You can sort by rebel category, etc. Use the advanced sorting tools, and you can sort the sheet however you want. Then for Clash of Wills, same thing. Basically, it's just that the Clash of Wills is over here. A few small changes. We're not assuming turn 5 burst. We're not assuming, and we are assuming the Clash of Wills boss. So these are built versus Clash of Wills, and we're only showing morale damage dealers in this sheet. And again, this is calculated at maximum morale. So Dark Knight Dwayne, Ibarra, etc. And then scrolling down a little bit, you can see these are the Clash of Wills damage dealers that are either just outdated and don't deal enough damage, like Yigni or Napi, or they are locked to the wrong element. For example, Ayaka. Like Ayaka cannot deal fire, earth, or dark damage, therefore she's definitely not coming to the next Clash of Wills, so she's stuck down here in the not calculated category. And then I'll go and take these and put them in the main sheet when the Clash of Wills boss does match up to them. For example, the new Addison is locked to light element, so therefore she's not calculated in the main sheet, although I did calc her just for comparison's sake because she's a brand new unit. And then over here, we've got the future units category. This is the long-term future JP units that are coming based on our expectations. Now, these builds are not always up to date because, for one thing, the builder doesn't always work perfectly for JP units. It does sometimes. It doesn't always work for enhanced units, etc. So some of these builds are kind of estimated, but they can give you a general idea. This is both new units like True King Noctis, Elric, Scar, etc. Also crowned units. For example, Dragoon Kane is getting crowns in the future. Titus is getting crowns in the future. and it can give you an estimated idea of some upcoming JP units. Now keep in mind, global does change things, global does skip things, global does change the order of release. So use this as a reference, but don't take it as the gospel. And then we have the calculator tab. Now this is a very, very useful tool if you know how to use it. So on this sheet right here, I've got currently my last Dark Visions party still saved. And this is how I get the calculations for my Dark Visions parties. Also my my Clash of Wills parties every now and then, but usually I don't calculate Clash of Wills because it's pretty easy to cap. But for Dark Visions, I'll use this very, very often. So here is the sheet. So we've got 6 different unit slots that can calculate a full party of 6. So over here at the top of the screen per unit, you're going to put the boss's final stats. So the defense and spirit after breaks and passives. So the previous boss had 3 million defense and spirit. I was using an 89% break. So that's why I have 330,000 as the defense and spirit, because 3 million defense with an 89% break and no passive gives you 330,000. And one of the ways you can do this is to just take the defense number and multiply it by the remainder of the break. So for example, if it's 3 million defense, 89 break, go 3 million times 0.11 for 11 remaining, and that'll give you the defense and spirit. As far as the resistances go, you put again the final resistance. So the boss by memory had 0 fire resist. I was using a fire team, so we were doing a 150 in peril with Reagan's Magnus, and we were doing a 25 in peril with Lena's Field. So that's a 175, a minus 175 resistance. We put that up here. Now, as far as each unit, you're going to use this little drop-down tab here, and you're going to choose the unit's damage type. So this one is Genesis, so magical damage. Rain, physical, Typhus, physical. We've also got Evokers, and this tab actually does support hybrids. So you can calculate Carlet on this tab. It'll work totally fine, because this tab is a specific damage-dealing tab, not you get the idea. And as far as this drop down, this only basically matters for Genesis, Typhus in the future, but if your unit is ever hitting the damage cap with a single hit skill, just swap this to single hit. So as you see, Genesis on the last Dark Visions could have gone as high as 12.8 billion, but he'll never go that high because he's locked to the damage cap. So we swap this to single hit. That puts it right there. And then Rain can go over the damage cap. He wasn't strong enough to, but if he was strong enough to, he could have. So his is set to multi-hit. And then for the units, you just enter in all of the units' relevant stats. So you put in their level, either 120, 130, or whatever. You put in their attack or magic or defense spirit, whatever they scale on, and you put the final buffed value. This is both the final value as well as any kind of focus or berserk, etc. Whatever their final total calculated value is, you're going to put that in this box. Then you put in the modifier of their skill. For Genesis, it's Meteor. For Rain, it's his LB 530, etc. You put in the unit's minimum and maximum weapon variance for the weapon they're using. Genesis was using a 2-handed sword. Rain was using a 1-handed sword. So you put in the minimum and maximum variance. You put in their final amplify. So for Genesis, it was 150 plus Lena's Field is 190. For Blades of Black Flame Reagan, he was mixing his amplifies. He was using a 100 fire amp from the Vision card. He was using a 40% amp from Lena. So that, he actually didn't use the Vision card, I don't think. Yeah, he didn't have time to. No, he wasn't using his dark. That's right. He wasn't using his dark amp because the boss was irritating. So he was using a 100 fire amp, a 40% field amp, and then he was using. I don't remember. last boss was irritating. In any case, when you're mixing amplifies, you've got to put it in like that. You've got to put it in the final verse. Yeah, Reagan, I forget, the boss had those irritating dispels and fields. I don't know what Reagan was doing. In any case, his amplify was mixed. You put in the weapon in peril. You put in the LB, the total LB damage. So, for example, 300 from gear, 300 from a buff, and if you're using a field, you'd put in 700, etc., etc. The killer percent with gear and buff combined, and again, if you're doing multiple races, you've got to average them out. And then if you're a jumper, you put in jump percent. If you're an evoker, you put in your evoke stats. You put in your chain modifier. Technically speaking, for someone that's building a chain, you could calculate the building chain mod and do like 7.23 or something. For convenience's sake, I just use the maximum chain modifier. And then for the DV party bonus, you put in the party bonus if you're on element. So 20% bonus for Clash of Wills, you just delete that. And yeah, you put in all the units, and that will calculate. This will calculate down here all the units combined. It'll show you your total team's possible damage, either your minimum, your average, and your maximum potential. And yeah, you can use this to calculate your party's damage. And that's basically just a quick primer on how to use my damage spreadsheet. So hopefully it's helpful. I try to update it every single week with the new units. I update it every single month for the new Clash of Wills. I update it frequently for the new Dark Visions bosses. And yeah, so again, the best way to change it the way you want, go up here, go to make a copy, and make a local copy, and then you can change anything you want. You can, if for example, you want to change amplifies and Clash of Wills to assume field, if you want to change your leader skill, you can do all of that. So, okay, hope it helps. See you in a bit.